A day in the life of Vladimir Putin. If you want to see the luxurious life that the 1% live in, subscribe and click the bell, that way you never miss a video. Vladimir Putin is an ominous political figure. The controversial president's career has been littered with questionable events, from tension in Syria to the suspected poisoning of intelligence agents to the invasion of Ukraine. The perfectly controlled environment Russia's leader inhabits, his rigid routines and lack of spontaneity are like a prison in which he is isolated himself. Images of him speaking to his own government reinforce this picture of the Russian president, staying meters away from even his closest aides. His daily routine is frankly shocking and incredibly regimented. Make sure you stay until the very end, where we'll tell you one of the president's favorite sports to play, and spoiler alert, he always wins. The president wakes late and eats shortly after noon when he doesn't have an early meeting, which is something he does his best to avoid. He begins with the simplest of breakfast. There is always cottage cheese. His cooked portion is always substantial. He'll usually have an omelette or occasionally porridge. He also likes quail's eggs. In addition to that, he drinks fruit juice. The food is always fresh, as he has baskets of his favorites dispatched regularly from the farmland estates of the patriarch Kirill, Russia's religious leader. Being as reclusive as he is, he's naturally wary of any food he eats. The president is known to be fearful of falling ill, and poison is top of the list of things he wants to avoid. We can't imagine why he thinks anyone would want to poison him though. He has his own personal chef that goes with him everywhere. So even when he's abroad on business or pleasure, he can get the same breakfast cooked by the same loyal person. Like we said earlier, he's a creature of habit. He's then served coffee and has his courtiers and advisors summoned. But there isn't time for an early morning coffee meeting. No, these first 2 hours are taken up with swimming. The president enjoys this solitary time in the water. This is where the political assistants say he gets much of Russia's thinking done. While the president works out the biggest issues of the day, the courtiers he summoned earlier joke and idle and cross their legs in lacquered wood waiting rooms. He rarely gets around to seeing them quickly. They say 3, perhaps 4 hours is the normal wait to see Vladimir Putin. After his swim, the president likes to spend some time in the gym, where Russian rolling news is switched on. He already knows what's going to be said, as most of the media is controlled by him. But like any playwright, he loves to watch his own work. In the gym, he enjoys the weights much more than the exercise bikes. And if you've seen photos of him topless, it shows. With his daily workout done, it's time to start the day properly. Actually, by this point, it's normally mid to late afternoon, but you get the idea. When the president dresses, he chooses to wear only tailored, bespoke suits in conservative colors. His choice of ties is usually gloomy to match his personality. Once he begins his workday, he starts with briefing notes. This mostly takes place at his heavy wooden desk. These are offices without screens. The president uses only the most secure technologies, red folders with paper documents, and fixed-line Soviet war-era telephones. This is his paranoia on show again. Putin doesn't trust anything he doesn't understand, and at 69 years old, he's probably as good with computers as your grandma. He begins his workday by reading 3 thick leather-bound folders. The first are reports on the home front compiled by the FSB, his domestic intelligence service. The second, his report on international affairs compiled by the SVR, his foreign intelligence. And finally, his report on the court compiled by the FSO, his army of close protection. Putin is a control freak, and because of this, he has to know exactly what's going on in his country and around the world. Next come the thickest folders, and they aren't intelligence reports. They're actually press clippings. His hands first open the Russian Press Digest. The most important papers come at the front, the national tabloids. These matter most, with their millions of readers. Then he moves on to Russia's quality press, the lightly censored broadsheets. These matter in the Kremlin court. This is their gossip, their columnists, their analysis. He pays particular attention to the regular columns about himself written by Andrei Kolesnikov in Kommersant. His courtiers say he enjoys them greatly and always reads right to the end. These papers have a little more freedom than the tabloids do, and offer him one of the few surprises in his day. He could just get all of this from the internet, but as we said earlier, he doesn't trust what he doesn't understand. He might not use the internet himself, but from time to time, his advisors do show him satirical online videos. It's unlikely these are for his own amusement. Instead, he likes to know how the rest of the world mocks him. It's the same reason he reads clippings from the foreign press, especially those from Germany where he was stationed as a KGB agent. Once he's up to speed with the media, it's time to start his workday. He follows the daily schedule handed to him. Mostly, the meetings are meaningless. There are those who come to pay homage to him, such as receiving the Prince of Bahrain or awarding bronze medals to unmarked heroes of labor. Putin will happily stay up late into the night and the early hours of the morning working. He prefers the cold and dark of the Russian nighttime, maybe because it matches his mentality so well. Those courtiers he called hours earlier might be called in for any meetings of importance once the sun sets. The president thinks very little on his feet. His speeches are all pre-written, the political positions all preconceived, and any negotiations are mostly commercial in nature. He looks emotionless, as if nothing really touches him, one interpreter said of the president. As if he's hardly aware of what happens around him. As if he's paying little attention to those people. As if he's worn out. He has spent so long as an icon, he's not used to anyone penetrating. He's not used to anything not being so perfectly controlled for him. He's isolated, trapped. When he travels abroad, things get even worse for Putin. His routine creates a shell around him that keeps him safe in Russia. But once out of the country, it's harder to maintain, so he adopts new strategies to keep himself safe. The intelligence service plans everything in advance. A pilot group comes a month before the president to the capital in question. The luxury hotel his administration will occupy is inspected. How secure is that room, and how biocontaminable is the bathroom? Everything is checked to ensure that no one or thing can get anywhere near the president without first being checked multiple times over. The court has established itself on foreign soil a week before he arrives. They've booked and sealed 200 rooms. There's a special lift, uniquely prepared for presidential use. His room is sealed once inspected, and no one is allowed to access it. This is the work of the special security team. The hotel sheets and toiletries are removed and replaced. Their places filled with wash stuff and fresh fruit under special Kremlin anti-contamination seals. Meanwhile, everything he will need arrives by the plane load. The Russian cook we spoke about earlier arrives as well, as Russian cleaners and Russian waiters. This is where the challenges for the host nation really start to ramp up. The president cannot be served milk products unless the Russian security services decide otherwise. The president cannot be offered food by whoever is hosting him, and that rule has even extended to the Queen of England in the past. The president cannot consume foreign foodstuffs that have not been cleared by the Kremlin. Perhaps the president is secretly lactose intolerant. It would explain the aversion to milk product, but it's more likely he's paranoid about poisoning. Russian materials are shipped in advance for the presidential platter, where cooks will be supervised by the FSB, SVR, FSO, and their team of tasters. The president has been known to refuse to touch food at even the grandest of buffets if he doesn't believe it to be safe. Just think of all the amazing food that must have been wasted on him. So now you know just how challenging the workday of the president of Russia can be. Surely his weekends must be a little more relaxed though. It shouldn't be a surprise to you when I tell you they aren't. On weekends, he enjoys study sessions in the afternoon. Mostly, he studies the English language. His teacher helps him learn difficult words. There are times on Sundays he's said to pray or make a confession, but courtiers familiar with the office of the patriarch are at pains to clarify that though he isn't an atheist, his life is not that of a Christian. Before we tell you Vladimir Putin's favorite sport to play, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe and click the bell icon. That way, you'll be the first to see our next luxury video. When not in prayer or studying, the president loves ice hockey. This is his favorite sport. The president practices ice hockey as much as he can. Every few weeks, he organizes a game, and those who are invited constantly brag about it. The peak of Ogliarch society is being invited to watch one of the president's hockey matches. Those invited are his most intimate allies. Most, like him, are from St. Petersburg, old associates from his life before becoming president. They're mostly businessmen, all of whom are featured on a sanction list somewhere in the world. The game follows the normal rules of ice hockey with one obvious addition. The president never loses. The teams are filled out with bodyguards. The president's bodyguards wear his shirt. The bodyguards of Dmitry Medvedev, his prime minister, fill the opposing team, but the prime minister himself is rarely present, perhaps in fear of what Putin might do if Dmitry has annoyed him that week. After a busy day of scaring his government officials or dominating a friendly ice hockey game, he heads back home to go to bed and a good book. The books he finds most interesting are history books, heavy and respectable tomes about Ivan the Terrible, Catherine II, and Peter the Great. Anything that features Russia's most famous leaders. You might call them his idols. Sometimes, though, he does read a novel. In 2006, the president is said to have read a thriller in which working-class men beat up Chechens and cops and seize the governor's office from corrupt thieves with machine guns. Another favorite is The Third Empire, a fantasy about an imaginary Latin American historian from 2054 who recounts the exploits of Tsar Vladimir II, the ingatherer of all Russian lands. By the end of his busy day, it is well into the early hours of the morning, but the president doesn't care. He's happiest during the dark hours. Perhaps they help to maintain the box he's created for himself. Like a child enjoying a game of peekaboo, if you can't see the outside world, then maybe it doesn't really exist. Click the video on the screen to see another luxury video.